Too much 50 Cent, not enough West Coast rap. 50 Cent.
JC! I said JC! You old ass. You old ass.
I will your thug up.
When have you ever heard an Eminem song in the club? I don't hear Eminem in the streets. I'm just a better rapper.
When people talk about wasted potential in hip-hop, they usually throw out names like Fetty Wap, Roddy Ricch, or Chance the Rapper, artists who came in hot, dropped fire tracks, then fizzled out. But there's one name that don't get brought up enough: The Game. And truth is, that man had everything it took to be one of the greatest. Flow? Check. Pen game? Sharp. Cosigns from legends? Had those too. But what he didn't have was focus. The Game could have built a legacy right next to the likes of Eminem, 50 Cent, and Jay-Z. Instead, he scattered his energy into beefs, petty drama, and wild stunts that slowly pushed him out the circle. The more he chased conflict, the more the industry turned its back on him. And that was made crystal clear recently when one of the biggest West Coast hip-hop celebrations in years went down. And The Game wasn't even invited. Dre was there, Kendrick was there, Snoop, YG, Mustard, Black Hippie, every LA heavyweight pulled up, but not Game. And that silence from the West, that said everything. But to understand how he got left behind, you gotta go back. Back to when The Game was just a kid from Compton, caught up in gang life, and almost lost it all. In 2001, he was shot and nearly killed. That moment made him shift. He locked in, told his brother to grab a stack of classic rap albums, and studied the greats like it was homework. A year later, he dropped his first mixtape, You Know What It Is, Vol. 1. It caught Daddy's attention but didn't lead to a deal. Then it landed in the hands of Dr. Dre, and that's when everything changed. By 2003, Dre signed him to Aftermath, and soon after, Jimmy Iovine and Dre teamed him up with 50 Cent and G-Unit, who were running the streets at the time. It was a power move. Game had raw talent, and 50 had a hot streak. Together, they could dominate, and they did. Game dropped massive singles like How We Do and Hate It or Love It with 50. His debut album, The Documentary, went crazy. Critics praised it. The streets loved it. He had arrived. But that success came with tension. 50 started claiming he wrote big chunks of the documentary, up to 30%, depending on the day. Whether that's true or not, what is true is that being next to 50 gave Game a bigger spotlight than he could have got on his own. And in return, Game pledged loyalty. He started jumping into all of 50's beefs. And that is where a pattern began. Game constantly inserting himself into drama that had nothing to do with him. One of his first solo beefs was with Lil Eazy-E, son of the late West Coast legend. They started off cool, even made music together. But when Game tried to name his debut NWA, which obviously ties back to Eazy-E, Lil Eazy felt disrespected. Game clapped back on a track, accusing Lil Eazy of not even writing his own bars. And even though he later claimed he didn't want to disrespect the family, the damage was done. Then came Suge Knight. Out of nowhere, Game went at him too. He said Suge had endangered too many lives and needed to be checked. This was bold, considering Suge's history in the industry. Things got real when rapper Yuckmouth claimed Suge slapped Game. Game denied it hard, saying if that ever happened, Suge would be 6 feet under. The beef heated up when Suge got shot at a VMA's afterparty. People speculated Game was involved, but nothing stuck. And while all this was brewing, there was trouble at home. The same year Game dropped his debut album, his relationship with 50 Cent and G-Unit hit a wall. They were already beefing before the album even dropped. 50 accused Game of not backing him in his beefs with Jadakiss and Fat Joe. Then 50 claimed he wasn't getting credit for the songs he wrote on the documentary. Game denied it all, but the tension boiled over when a shooting happened outside a radio station where 50 had just kicked Game out of G-Unit live on air. It got ugly fast. The two held a press conference saying they squashed the beef, but no one believed it. Game came back swinging, starting a movement called G-Uno and dissing 50 and his crew on track after track. He dropped 300 bars in Runnin', one of the longest diss tracks ever, and followed up with mixtapes like Ghost Unit and Stop Snitchin', Stop Lyin'. He even took shots at Jay-Z, launching a feud that would last years, even though Jay never officially responded. In fact, that was another theme with the game. He would constantly throw disses at artists way bigger than him, hoping they'd bite, but most didn't. Jay-Z ignored him, Eminem didn't engage for years, and it made Game look more like an attention seeker than a true rival. He'd get on stage, have crowds chant F Jay-Z, and say anyone who liked Jay could leave the show. Jay eventually called him a groupie, said he wasn't worth the response. And it didn't stop there. After getting dropped from G-Unit and Aftermath, Game moved to Geffen Records, another Interscope label. He claimed Dre was still involved in his next project, The Doctor's Advocate, but no Dre beats showed up on the album. He later admitted Dre had nothing to do with it. Still, the album went hard. Tracks like One Blood and Wouldn't Get Far with Kanye kept him relevant. But the chaos behind the scenes never slowed down. By 2008, he was claiming he'd retire after dropping LAX. Of course, he didn't. He came back with the RED album in 2011, then claimed Born to Rap in 2019 would be his final project too. Every time he said he was done, another album popped up a few years later. Fans caught on. Retirement was just another rollout tactic. But the real issue wasn't the fake retirements or even the diss tracks. It was that Game seemed more focused on drama than the music. While other rappers were building empires, launching brands, and evolving their sound, Game was still chasing clout through beefs. And the industry noticed. That's why he got left out of major events, like the Super Bowl and Kendrick's West Coast celebration. By now it was clear, the Game had made beef his brand. Every time things started going quiet, he'd toss himself into someone else's battle, just to stir the pot. And it didn't matter if the fight had nothing to do with him. He'd jump in like it was personal. That tactic kept him in headlines, but it also got real tired, real fast. In 2013, he dipped into a beef between Tyga and Lil Durk. Yeah, you heard that right. Game inserted himself into a fight between two rappers who weren't even in his lane. It all started when Lil Durk took a shot at Tyga in a song, and Tyga responded with his own diss track. But instead of letting them handle it, Game jumped on Tyga's remix and went off on Durk, spitting bars that had nothing to do with him directly. He rapped like Durk owed him money or something. Threats, insults, even dragging Durk's name through the dirt like they had real beef. But LA rapper Compton Menace called it out quick, saying, "This man takes on everybody's beef except his own." Lil Durk didn't hold back either. He called Game soft, said Tyga needed Game on the track just to feel tough. They ended up squashing it at the 2014 BET Awards, but the damage was done. People saw through the act. Game was just using other people's drama to keep his name alive. And that pattern kept repeating. In 2015, when Lil Wayne started beefing with Young Thug, Game once again hopped in. Thug had named his album Barter 6, a play on Wayne's Carter series, and Wayne wasn't having it. Game decided he was going to stand up for Wayne, even though nobody asked him to. At a concert in New Orleans, he got on stage and said straight up, "Anybody messing with Tune got a problem with me. I'll mess Young Thug up." Thug responded with a now famous Instagram video, clowning Game for switching gangs and accusing him of being a male stripper back in the day. It was messy, and just like that, Game was tangled in another beef that had nothing to do with him. A year later, the same thing happened with Meek Mill. By 2016, Meek had already taken a massive L from his beef with Drake. The man was still trying to recover, but Game saw an opening and took his shot. He got on stage at Story nightclub in Miami and called Meek a snitch, claiming Meek told police that Game set up singer Sean Kingston to get robbed. Meek denied it, Sean Kingston denied it, but Game turned the moment into promo for his album, dropping the diss track 92 Bars. Meek fired back with a remix to Young M.A.'s "Ooh" featuring Beanie Sigel. Game responded again with his own remix, scolding Meek and throwing shots at Beanie too. It turned into a messy back and forth that nobody asked for. Eventually, Meek fell back. Game kept throwing freestyles, but the energy was off. At that point, fans were getting tired. It felt like Game wasn't battling for sport. He was battling for attention. And that's where the respect started slipping. Outside of music beefs, Game kept his name buzzing with social media antics too. He filmed himself chasing down and fighting rapper 40 Glock, posted it to WorldStar, and bragged about it. He threatened Waka Flocka on IG, claimed he'd boxed Gucci Mane, and even beefed with Chris Brown over Cariucci. But just like the music beefs, most of these fizzled out after a few posts or a quick apology. This kind of behavior worked back in the early 2000s when drama sold records. But by the mid-2010s, fans were over it. Social media was flooded with attention seekers, and Game's moves just blended in with the noise. Meanwhile, other rappers were growing, evolving, locking in deals, and expanding their brands. Even when Game tried to show love, it got messy. In 2012, he shouted out Kanye in a track, saying he'd ride for him if anyone disrespected him or Kim Kardashian. But just a few years later, Game dropped lyrics bragging about sleeping with Kim and 2 other Kardashians. He even released a track where he said Kanye was his boy, but he still crossed the line by talking about Kanye's ex-wife in explicit detail. The contradictions were wild. One minute he's defending someone, the next he's dissing them for clout. And people started questioning whether Game had any real loyalty at all. But things really started looking sad when he was left off the Super Bowl LVI halftime show in 2022. That show was a full-on celebration of West Coast rap. Dr. Dre was at the center, bringing out Kendrick Lamar, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, 50 Cent, Mary J. Blige, and still no invite for Game. It hurt, and you could tell because shortly after, Game went on Drink Champs and started wilding. He claimed Kanye did more for him in 2 weeks than Dre did for his whole career. Mind you, Dre was the one who signed him, gave him a platform, and helped launch his debut album. But now Game was acting like all that meant nothing. It was obvious. He felt left out, and he lashed out. Then he doubled down by taking shots at Eminem, saying he used to think M was better, but now he knew he was better than M. That line alone sparked a new wave of drama. And it wasn't just talk. Game followed up with a 9-minute diss track called The Black Slim Shady, where he mimicked M's flow, characters, and style, all while trying to tear him down. It was one of the longest and most elaborate diss tracks in years, but again, it felt forced. The first couple verses sounded like an homage, almost like Game respected M more than he wanted to admit. But by the third verse, he was taking shots left and right, saying 50 rights for M pops pills, and even that Big Sean's a better rapper. It was a wild ride. Eminem didn't even flinch. Instead, M threw some slick lines in a feature verse for Esmil's song Realist, where he clowned rappers who only get club spins because they're the ones performing their own old hits. That was clearly aimed at Game. It was M's way of saying, I'm doing stadium tours. You're stuck on the same stages from 20 years ago. After that, Game pulled the usual move. He walked it back, claimed there was no bad blood, said he respected M, said it was just hip-hop, nothing personal. But by then, the damage was done. The Game's reputation was stained by years of petty beefs, constant flip-flopping, and a refusal to evolve. He was talented, no question. But instead of building something lasting, he burned every bridge he crossed. While the rap beefs were loud and wild, the real storm was happening in the courtroom. Behind the scenes, the Game was getting dragged into a legal mess that would hit harder than any diss track. It all started with a reality show called She's Got Game, a dating series where women competed to win Game's heart. What was meant to be a quick VH1 cash grab turned into one of the most expensive mistakes of his life. One of the contestants, Priscilla Rainey, later sued the Game for sexual assault, claiming he groped her during an off-camera outing while filming the show. She said he lifted her skirt, touched her inappropriately in public, and humiliated her in front of a crowd. And this wasn't just hearsay. She filed an official federal lawsuit, backed with on-camera evidence, including confrontations captured on the show's tour bus. But instead of facing the case head-on, the Game did what he always seemed to do. He disappeared. Court servers tried to track him down over 40 times across multiple states. He dodged every attempt. He didn't show up, didn't file proper responses. And in court, that's the worst thing you can do. So what happened? The judge ruled in Rainey's favor by default. She was originally asking for $10 million. The court awarded her $13 million. That's when everything started to fall apart for the Game financially. His reaction? He went straight to Instagram, called her names, mocked her, accused her of lying, and made fun of the judgment. But while he was laughing online, the court was already taking action. Rainey didn't wait around hoping he'd pay up. She went after everything. She subpoenaed his companies. She tracked his business accounts. She even dug into his record label, LA Prolific. Eventually, the court granted her full control over the label. That meant every dollar made from his 2019 album, Born to Rap, would now go directly to her until the debt was cleared. Imagine that, dropping an entire album, doing all the work, and not seeing a single dime. That's exactly what happened. And when people asked why he wasn't promoting the album more or touring for it, that was the reason. The money wasn't going to him. He couldn't eat off his own music. Even worse, she started looking into his assets, real estate, vehicles, business shares. And she found out something strange about his Calabasas mansion. The house wasn't in Game's name anymore. It had allegedly been gifted to his manager, Whack 100. No money exchanged, no business deal, just a quiet handoff. But the court wasn't buying it. Rainey's legal team argued that this was just a way to hide assets, to make it look like he didn't own anything, when in reality he was still living there and benefiting from it. They subpoenaed schools to prove Game still lived at the property. And once the proof lined up, the judge approved the forced sale of the house to help cover the judgment. That house was estimated at around $3.2 million. Even with that money, Game would still owe Rainey nearly $4 million more. That's how deep in the hole he was. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about his whole career being on lockdown. At the same time, his former collaborator Kanye West teamed up with him for the track Easy in 22. But thanks to the court order, Rainey got paid before he did. Any feature money, any royalties from streams, any back-end checks, they all went straight to her. Every move he made in music was getting taxed. Even as he tried to act like things were cool, the pressure was getting to him. He went online talking about how he was broke and that everything he owned was rented or borrowed. He said he had no assets in his name. But Rainey wasn't letting go. She hired investigators, tracked companies linked to him, and kept hitting him with subpoenas. Eventually, the judge demanded full access to his financial records. When his team finally handed them over, the court found enough evidence to seize all profits from his label and future projects. That included any money paid to him personally. If it passed through a company or business tied to Game, it was getting flagged and redirected. At that point, he tried suing Viacom, the parent company behind VH1, claiming they should have never cast Rainey due to a prior mental health recommendation. He demanded $20 million, saying they were responsible for the situation. But that lawsuit flopped. The court tossed it out, and now he had to pay Viacom's legal fees too. So here's the situation. By 2020, Game had lost his house, his album earnings, his label control, and was still millions away from settling the full judgment. And on top of that, the industry had left him behind. He wasn't getting booked for major shows. He wasn't getting invited to big LA events. The people who once co-signed him were moving on without him. Even though Game still had the skills, the focus was gone. The hunger that made the documentary a classic, that was replaced with chaos, random disses, social media antics, and court drama. While guys like Jay-Z, Eminem, Snoop, and Dre were out building legacies, Game was stuck in a loop of beef, clout chasing, and financial losses. By now, even longtime fans were split. Some still loved the music, still believed in his talent. But others saw the pattern, always hyping retirements, always dissing someone, always backpedaling after the attention hit. The maturity never showed up, and the industry wasn't waiting around anymore. Game had the foundation to be a legend. He had the pen, the look, the story, and the cosigns. But the distractions kept pulling him off course. He let pride, ego, and drama get in the way of a legacy that could have been untouchable. So now we're in prime. Game is in his 40s, still sharp with the pen, still rapping like he's got something to prove. But the problem? The industry ain't listening like it used to. After all the drama, all the beefs, all the legal mess, he's still dropping albums, still making noise, but barely making impact. Let's talk about his recent moves. In 2023, Game announced yet another last album called Drillmatic. Yeah, this was his third retirement claim after saying LAX in 2008 and Born 2 Rap in 2019 would be his final projects. But instead of calling it a comeback, it felt more like a broken record. Fans were like, "Didn't you retire already?" Even worse, Drillmatic was full of more shots. Game came for Eminem again, this time dropping a 9-minute diss track called The Black Slim Shady. He mimicked M's flows, mocked his legacy, and even created a storyline about riding with Stan's brother as an Uber driver. It was creative, no doubt, but it screamed desperation. The kind of desperation that shows up when you know your buzz is fading and you need something big to get people talking. And sure, it worked for a little while. People reacted. Media outlets covered it. But M didn't give him the response he wanted. Instead, M clapped back subtly in a verse on Esmeal's Realist, dropping a few bars about washed rappers still performing their own songs just to stay in the club rotation. Everyone knew who he was talking about. That bar hit deep, because Game really was still performing old hits to stay relevant. And while there's nothing wrong with that, lots of legends tore their classics. M's point was this: some rappers evolve, some expand. Game? He was just running in circles. After that, in typical Game fashion, he tried to soften the blow. Said there was no real beef with M, that it wasn't personal, and that he only dissed M because nobody else does. Claimed it was all for the culture, just rap. But at this point, the excuses started sounding like old mixtape ad-libs. Then came his comments about Dr. Dre. In 2022, after Dre left him off the Super Bowl halftime show, a huge LA moment where Dre brought out Eminem, Snoop, 50, Kendrick, and Mary J. Game took it personal. He went on Drink Champs and said Kanye had done more for his career in 2 weeks than Dre ever did in his lifetime. That was wild, considering Dre discovered him, signed him, and executive produced his debut classic, the documentary. Game later walked it back in a 2024 Vlad TV interview, blaming the rant on alcohol. He said Dre had to protect his own brand and couldn't ride for Game the way Ye did. And maybe there's some truth in that, but the way he aired it out made him look bitter, not honest. At this point, Game started rewriting history in interviews, saying all the beefs were just hip-hop, that none of them were personal. Claimed he never had real issues with M, 50, Jay-Z, or Meek Mill. Said it was all lyrical, all for the sport. Cool. But the problem? The energy never matched. He'd spend years throwing shots at these same rappers, then act confused when the industry didn't invite him to the party. And that became the biggest issue in his career. Not his music, not his talent, but the bridges he burned and the grudges he held on to. So when Kendrick Lamar hosted a massive LA celebration in 2024, bringing out the whole West Coast from Tyler, YG, DJ Mustard, to legends like Dre and Snoop, Game was once again left out. Another stage, another moment, another snub. And like clockwork, he jumped on Instagram Live for 17 minutes, ranting about how much he's done for LA, how he helped Kendrick early on, how people know who he is in California. It was emotional, but also kind of sad, because instead of celebrating the moment, he was once again on the sidelines, yelling about why he wasn't invited. The truth? He never evolved past the beefs, never shifted into OG mode. While 50 Cent became a media mogul with hit TV shows, while Snoop became a global brand, while Eminem kept touring the world and selling out arenas, Game stayed stuck in battle mode, still dissing, still comparing himself to others, still chasing the respect he should have already had. He's got the skill set, no doubt. Still one of the most gifted rappers from the West Coast. He's proven he can make classic albums. The documentary alone puts him in the conversation. But skill isn't enough. It's about how you move in the long run. And Game spent too much time fighting and not enough time building. Even the lawsuit with Priscilla Rainey added to the cloud over his legacy. That $7 million judgment locked him down for years. It cost him his house, his label, his music profits. And instead of resolving it early, he ducked out court, mocked the case, and made it worse for himself. It's a pattern that keeps showing up. Instead of facing problems, he runs or lashes out, and then wonders why things fall apart. So now here we are. The Game still got the skills, still got the pen, still capable of spitting with the best, but at this point, he's not just chasing hits. He's chasing a legacy that slipped through his fingers. And unless he finally dials in, cuts the moss, and focuses on growth, he might go down as one of the coldest to ever do it, who never got the credit he truly deserved because he couldn't get out of his own way. But it ain't too late, only if he stops beefing with ghosts and starts building with intention. No more blaming Dre, no more side shots at M, no more rants about who left him off the guest list. Either show and prove, or step back with grace. Let the bars talk, or don't talk at all.